So this is just a short match reaction podcast to the Manchester United victory over Fulham in the FA Cup quarter-finals. So Manchester United will face Brighton in the FA Cup semi-final after getting through a pretty weird game against Fulham, where you'd have to say United were extremely fortunate to make it through. And but for a crazy 2-minute period, Fulham could have actually won the game or at least taken it into extra time. I think most United fans will admit that this was a concerning performance, as without Casemiro or Eriksen in central midfield, United just completely lacked the ability to progress the ball forward. And whilst I do sound like a broken record with this continuous analysis of the central midfield, and pinpointing the lack of ability in certain players, I don't really think at this point you can look past it. I think the fundamental issue is that Ten Hag is being forced to use either Sabitzer or McTominay when United move into the possession phase, sitting in a 3-1-6 shape. And whilst I do like Sabitzer as a combative, industrious central midfielder, providing a lot out of possession, and being a player who I probably wouldn't mind having in the squad next season, he's definitely not the deep-lying creator that United need from that position, and neither is McTominay. And so this is why the ball progression burden was on Bruno Fernandes, and that's why we saw him dropping very deep in this game. And whilst he is definitely better at this than either McTominay or Sabitzer, it's not really his game. He's much better when he's sitting between the lines and fundamentally being the player to create chances in the final third rather than a player to progress the ball into the final third. And this is why, even though I do like Sabitzer as a signing, I am starting to think that United should have signed a different type of central midfielder, as Sabitzer to me falls in the same sort of category as Fred and McTominay, being an improvement on those two rather than being a replacement for Eriksen, which is what United definitely needed in January. And so whilst people are claiming that fatigue is playing a major role in United sort of slowing up recently, but I beg to differ, and I would say the main reason for United struggling in recent games is actually because of the lack of quality and depth that Ten Hag has at his disposal. Having Maguire in the defensive line and McTominay sitting in front of the back line is just a recipe for United struggling to play through the centre of the pitch and just taking too long to move the ball. If you look at how Lisandro Martinez is able to receive the ball, get it out of his feet and play an incisive forward pass compared to what Harry Maguire does, you can see the stark difference. As well as I do like Maguire's ability to carry the ball forward, and he can play a long pass to switch play as well. He just completely takes the pace out of the play, taking far too long to make a decision. And in this game, this allowed Fulham to shuffle over and sit in their compact 4-4-2 shape. And so when Maguire did eventually get his head up and the ball out of his feet, there wasn't any passing lanes open. But the blame can't solely be blamed on Maguire, as apart from Bruno Fernandes, who did make a very good run between Anthony Robinson and Tim Ream in the first half and was found by a fantastic ball from Wan-Bissaka, everyone else from McTominay, Sabitzer and even Jadon Sancho as well don't make enough effort in my opinion to move quickly to open up a passing lane when a player receives the ball, and if there isn't movement ahead of players in those deeper positions, then no matter how good a forward passer they are, they're going to struggle to progress the ball in behind the opposition's midfield line. And that was the main problem for United in this game. They just couldn't progress the ball into dangerous positions to then create chances. I think we're also starting to see the limitations of United's attack, particularly when Rashford isn't able to do something sensational or score a goal out of absolutely nothing. I do have a video coming out on Weghorst very soon, and whilst I have been praising him over the last few months, particularly for his ability to drop off and link the play, which I do think is vital for United in terms of moving the attack forward, I do think he's very one-dimensional and limited. And whereas Anthony Martial had a varied skill set, able to do the same when he drops off links a play, he had so much more to his game, including being a lot quicker than Weghorst and also being a goal scoring threat when inside of the box, which Weghorst just isn't. And so for the first 60-65 minutes of the game, United's whole play in possession was very predictable, and other than one of the deeper lying players would look to play a more direct ball forward either into Weghorst or for one of the forward runners like Fernandes from deep, United didn't look like they were going to be able to create anything of substance. Now despite a rather lacklustre first half, United didn't really change things around at the start of the second half, and within the first few minutes of the second half starting, Maguire's dispossession on the edge of his own box led to Anthony Robinson's right-footed shot which forced De Gea into a good save. But just a few minutes later there was complete chaos from a Fulham corner, which led to the ball being flicked on and Mitrovic running off of Luke Shaw and putting the ball into the net and giving Fulham the lead, which you'd have to say they deserved. And to be honest, United were fortunate not to be more than one goal down. Mitrovic had a header which forced De Gea into a good save, and Willian had a fizzing shot from range which forced De Gea into probably his best save of the game. And I just feel that when one of Varane and Martinez are missing from that back line, and Harry Maguire comes into that defence, it just seems to spread uncertainty throughout the whole defensive system. Maguire himself individually isn't the best defender, but it seems like the players around him also seem to gain some sort of insecurity in their own defending, and this spread throughout the United defensive system. I also think Ten Hag could have definitely have done with Casemiro playing in the centre of midfield, particularly with Palhinha starring there for Fulham. as United just didn't have that combative midfielder who could compete alongside the Portuguese. And whilst I do think Palhinha is pretty limited in possession, he's absolutely outstanding without the ball. And so his presence alongside Fulham using a very narrow midfield 4 allowed them to really get the upper hand in the centre of the park. I also thought without Casemiro it was just far too easy for Fulham to break through the centre of United's midfield, particularly in the first half, and we saw Andreas Pereira gambling when United had the ball, anticipating a turnover, and when there was a turnover, Fulham were able to feed the ball into him as he had already moved goal side of McTominay, allowing him to receive the ball and run directly at the United back line. I think alongside David De Gea and maybe Bruno Fernandes as well, it was probably Antony who came off the bench, who was United's best player in this game. I did do a video a few days ago, which will be linked in the description below, analysing why I actually thought Amad and Garnacho will be better players than Antony in the next 2 to 3 seasons. But I have to say, I think Antony was very good when he came on in this game, and it was he carrying of the ball forward into the Fulham final third that led up to the penalty and the Willian red card, with Antony bursting forward, and crucially in this attacking piece of play, he got the timing and weight of his pass into Sancho absolutely perfect. And to be honest, it looked like Sancho had overdone it. But to be fair, he would have had a goal if Willian hadn't handled the ball in the line, and I don't really know why Fulham were complaining so much, because it was an obvious handball, and by the letter of the law, it is definitely a penalty, and at that point, Willian hadn't actually been sent off, which means that both Mitrovic and Marco Silva seemed to just be going mental about the fact the ref had given a penalty. And it wasn't like this was a penalty being awarded in the last few minutes. Even with 10 men, Fulham would have still had the lead and Bruno Fernandes would have had to take the penalty, so there was still a good chance that Fulham could have at least taken it to extra time. But they essentially lost the tie themselves, with Mitrovic getting sent off. The Marco Silva one doesn't really affect the actual state of play, but after Willian gets sent off and Mitrovic has already been sent off, playing with just 9 men for the rest of the game, it became almost inevitable that United would win. And after Fernandes showed his composure to coolly slot the ball into the corner, sending the keeper the wrong way for the penalty, it was only a matter of time, and United worked the ball well down the left side, with Shaw making a fantastic run in behind the Fulham man. And he put in a fantastic cross across the box, and Sabitzer was there to knock it in. And so after that, United just completely had control of the game. Added a third later on, but you'd have to say that United were fortunate. Had Willian not handled the ball in the line and Sancho had scored, then it still would have been 1-1 with quite a bit of time in the second half remaining. And you'd have to say up until that point, you could make a good case that Fulham were the better side. And so I could have easily seen it going into extra time, and then from there, you can't really predict it, especially if it goes to penalties. But whilst this is definitely a concerning performance, United have got through and they will face Brighton in the semi-finals, and then if they beat Brighton it will be either Sheffield United or Man City in the final. And with Ten Hag's side also being in the quarter-finals of the Europa League, I think United are only 7 games away from potentially doing a treble of some sorts. Obviously it's not the treble of 1999, I do have a series on that. If you want to see the whole series, I'll leave it linked in the description. But it's the same treble that Liverpool won in 2001. And to be honest, if United end the season with a top 4 place, finishing likely 3rd or 4th, as well as picking up the League Cup, FA Cup and Europa League, you'd have to say that's a fantastic first season for Ten Hag. Or not even just a fantastic first season, just a fantastic season in general. But even though United are now in touching distance of potentially doing that treble, you have to remember that last season Liverpool were 2 games away from winning a quadruple. And to be honest, I am getting slightly concerned now, particularly with Casemiro being absent for the next few Premier League games. And with now the pressure piling on, with the Europa League games definitely going to be getting harder, and still potentially having to face Manchester City in the FA Cup final, there is still a lot of work to be done. And to be honest, I think this 2-week international break which is coming up could actually do United some favours, as over the last few weeks I have been getting the impression that this United side may be starting to burn out and aren't reaching the same performance levels that we saw straight after the World Cup into January and February. So I definitely think this international break has come at the right time, and going into it, United are still in a very good position. So let me know what you thought of the game in the comment section below. You can also go to the description below to check out some of my other videos as well. Subscribe to the